So I had been, for people who haven't seen the previous episode, like I'm pretty clear that there was a big chapter where I was struggling, and I was like I'm not going there. I'm not dealing with this. I'm gonna put a lid on it and push the lid down and lock the lid closed and never open that thing at the same time. I was like, oh God, this I should probably look into this. So I was completely at war with myself, and I was a mess.
Yeah.
So in those years, uh, and um, and then there's an event I call the confirmation event, and so typical of this stuff. It is not an easy story to tell because it's like a bunch of short separate stories, and these short separate stories kind of overlap, but not in a tidy way. You kind of have to go back to this story and then jump to this story and then back to this story, and then in between it all are all these synchronicities and stuff like that. So the my confirmation event, and by confirmation I mean at that point, leading up to the confirmation event, it was like, oh God, well, like I don't think I'm special. I don't think anything happened to me. I'm no, don't, like I'll look into the phenomenon. Other people can have the experience, but I don't think I did. And even though I had some stuff that was so telling, and I knew it, and I was still like, nope, nope, nope. And then on the night of March 10th, 2013, event took place that that all that crumbled. And I was like, oh, you know, my old life ended and my new life has now begun. So leading up to March 10th, 2013, I had been to a UFO conference in Arizona, down near Phoenix. It was called I think they still run it. It's no longer in the same location. They run it in Phoenix proper. They ran it at a casino outside of Phoenix, which was great. It was really a beautiful spot. But it's the IUFOC, the International UFO Congress. And I was already hosting my podcast. So in 2013, I had been hosting my podcast for 4 years, probably a little less than 4 years, and I was already known as the Owl Guy. People called me, "Oh, you're the Owl Guy," and so I would go. So I was going around that conference asking everyone, like, "Have you ever had any odd experiences with owls?" And it wasn't everyone, obviously, but a lot of people would say, "Oh, here I got a great story." And I heard so many powerful stories on that weekend. Well, on that it was like a 5-day conference, so on that week there. Now, so I'm driving home, and I lived at the time in Idaho, and the conference was in Arizona. So you you put a line between Idaho and Utah, you got to drive through. Excuse me, you got to drive through Utah to get from Arizona to Idaho. So I was driving, and I purposely was like, I love that part of the world, so I'm gonna milk this, and I got a sleeping bag, and I can just sleep out, and there's such wonderful backcountry. I mean, just like, backcountry drives, like lonely roads. I avoided getting on the interstate, and so it was great. And this is something I've done a lot. I did a lot of outdoor work. I don't know, so this plays into it a little bit. I did a lot of outdoor work where I slept outside a lot, and I would on long drives like that, I just had a sleeping bag and in the back of the car and a nice thick pad and a pillow, and I would just sleep out under the stars. And so I was driving home, and it was funny. I was driving on Highway 89, and there was a point when I was going to merge onto the interstate that goes through Salt Lake, and that kind of speeds things up for part of the drive. And but I knew early in the afternoon, I knew that I was going to camp at this one spot. I was like, years ago I drove by this spot, and it's right around here. And I remember thinking, that's a really pretty spot. I bet you that'd be a really nice spot to sleep out. So I pull in, and it's after dark, and this is on Highway 20. I got the GPS coordinates on my blog, and I kept track of all this stuff in the aftermath of these events. So I pull into this little spot, and it's typical of the West, where there's there's just like little turnouts. It wasn't like an organized campsite, but obviously people had slept here before, and there was fire rings with, like, broken beer bottles in the fire rings and shotgun shells and stuff like that, pretty typical of southern Utah. And And so I got out and I laid down my um, sleeping pad. I had a big, thick sleeping pad and my bag, and I climbed in, and it was a long drive, and I was tired, and I was. It was really beautiful. It was really pretty spot. And it was cold, so it was March 10th is still winter, so it was cold, and but there was little patches of snow, but that part of southern Utah doesn't really get much snow, and so it was this, and it was calm, and it was a new moon, so there was no moon at all, so the stars were just incredible. And I remember very clearly that I said, like, oh man, this is awesome. I love this. I love this. So I rolled over and went to sleep. And at some point I woke up and I looked up on a hilltop nearby. And this is big open country, and the hilltop wasn't close. And I look up at this hilltop, and there's this big round structure on it with lights on it. And I think to myself, I say, that looks just like a landed flying saucer. And then I'm kind of like, well, like I was at this conference and I felt like I was kind of hot stuff at the conference. Like I'd already had, in my life, I'd had psychic experiences, minimal, but enough that I know that I've had them. And I was like, if this was a real flying saucer, I feel like I would feel it. Like I would feel cosmic, vibe. So I looked up at this thing and I just focused on this thing, and I felt nothing, like nothing. So I was like, oh, I rolled over and went to sleep. And I woke up later, and there was a coyote howling right near me. Now, actually, it was two coyotes. One was a little farther away and one was close. And I mean, like, close. And I sat up, and I've spent a lot of time out west, and the coyotes are little. I'm not worried about coyotes. And there were, and I was like, why can't I see this thing? There was sagebrush, and there was a juniper bush right at my feet, and my car was right there. And I kind of sat up, and I was like, this thing feels like it's right. Like it could not be any louder. If it was any louder, it'd be in my lap. It was like, so I was like, it just felt like if I had a little dog biscuit, like I could just take it and just kind of like toss it in the air, and the coyote could catch it in its mouth. And I just was like, this is incredible. And I looked up at the round structure on the hill, was still there. And I was like, wow. So I have slept out a lot in this kind of terrain, a lot in the West. I've heard a lot of coyotes. I live in a place with a lot of coyotes. I've heard a lot of coyotes. I have never, ever, ever, ever heard one that close and that loud. And then I kind of rolled over. And actually, it's funny. I was like, when I laid down, I was like, this is so cool. This is really cool. And I rolled over and went back to sleep. So I eventually woke up again, a third time, and there was a juniper bush at my feet, like the way I was lined up. My feet were lined up to this juniper bush. And I kind of sat up and did the thing where I was like, there was a bright light behind that bush. And I was kind of like, well, I think the road goes around there. So maybe there's a spot someone else could have pulled off there. Maybe there's another pull off and a car is parked there, but it didn't feel like the headlights of a car. And it didn't feel like like if a flashlight or a dome light, it was like, I don't know what that is. And then I kind of was like, and I looked up and the round structure was still there. There's a really funny thing, and I did an illustration of it. There's a little, like the round structure didn't look like anything. It looked like a black slice out of a cylinder. It looked like it looked like a water tank, like a big water tank. It was at nighttime, so whatever color, it would have been black at night. And it had a ring of lights around the edge of it. And then and they were actually, it's interesting, they weren't perfectly evenly spaced, right? They were a little offset and a little kind of willy-nilly where these lights were on the edge of it. And I was like, wow, someone's got like either a house up there, or there's some big water tank, or there's, I don't know, is it like some sort of like cell phone relay structure or something like that. But one of the little lights, there was one light that was offset, and it was like kind of away from the structure. And the house I grew up in, we had what we called the lawn light. So we had the front lawn, and there was a little post, and it had a lamp on it, and we could click the switch by the front door, and it would turn the lawn light on. And I remember thinking like, oh, someone turned the lawn light on. Because it was either during the coyote thing or it wasn't there initially. And I totally recognized it was there at one of these two times. So there's this bright light at my feet, and I'm like, I don't know, someone else pulled in. Someone else is camping here. So it's like, okay, that didn't bother me at all. I wasn't worried in the slightest. So I just rolled over and went to sleep. And the next morning I got up and early, and I was like, okay, I feel pretty rested. I got a long drive. I might as well get going. So I don't know what time it was. So, and I just packed up real quick. There wasn't much to do. You just rolled everything up and tossed it in the car, and I was driving. Now, I knew something had gone down that night. Now, here's a weird thing. I don't remember seeing the big structure on the hill in the morning when I got in the car. It might have been there. I simply don't remember like not noticing it. So like in my mind, I'm like, if it wasn't there, like if it had disappeared, I would, that would stick with me. But I don't actually remember. One more odd little detail is that was the morning of the time daylight savings time switch. So I was like, I went to the gas station or something. It was still dark, and the clock at the gas station didn't match the clock in my car. And I was like, what is going on? This is before the advent of the smartphone, really, or for me anyway. And so I didn't have a smartphone. I had a little flip phone, and I don't remember checking the time or anything like that. But I was like, why? Like something was up, and so it was like, God, like there's like some weirdness with time. It made total sense when I realized, but I remember being in this kind of paranoid, like, oh God, no, time's all messed up. And something happened last night. I know something happened last night. So I get home. It's about a 10, 11 hour drive from southern Utah to my house in Idaho. And the very first thing I do when I get in my house is I don't even think I took my coat off. I sat down at the desk and looked up that thing on Google Maps. I mean, I'm really good with maps. Like I did a lot of outdoor work. I make maps. I teach map work. I teach map and compass work. I make trail maps for courses so I was like, I zeroed in exactly where I was parked. I zeroed in exactly where it was like in a saddle on a hilltop. So there's two gentle peaks, and then there was a low point, and there was two gentle peaks. And in that low peak, that would, in like backcountry terminology, would call that a saddle between two small peaks. And then in that saddle is where that structure was. Now I measured, it was 2.5 miles from where I was sleeping. So whatever it was big. And then there's like where I was living in the valley, there's a house, and I measured it on the map, and it's about 2.5 miles away, and it's up on a hill. And from my front yard, I can see clearly the house 2.5 miles away. I could see if there's a car in the driveway. I can see the windows. I can't see much detail, but it was like, okay, well, I can recognize that's a house. I can see the windows. I can see the driveway. I can see the car. So that, and I was like, wow, and I thought, I went through all these. It's like, well, what if so the map was made a couple years before. It's a 2011, I think, on the map, and it was now 2013. So in those 2 years, maybe somebody built something in those 2 years. Now, I will say I have been back to that spot many times, and there's nothing on that hilltop. So I sat down and made a blog post. I did a very detailed rendering of the spot. I had maps, I made maps, I had the little points, and there's from here to here, here's the distance, and here's the GPS coordinates. And I said, hey, this weird thing happened last night. And I put it up online, and there's a fellow named, his pen name is Red Pill Junkie. And he's kind of a famous character in these circles. And he got back to me right away, and he said that your post is time-stamped 12/34. And then the next day I was still like, wow, that was, like I was still kind of mulling all this over in my head. And I kind of have this moment where I walked between room to room, and I was standing right by my desk, and I had this like electric, like click, click. And I had this vision of a map in my mind. And it was a map of southern Utah with a little bit of Colorado in it, and the state lines drawn. and a straight yellow line that was a little off level with 3 push pins, like 3 demarcation kind of push pins like you would use in a map making program. And there were 3 points on this yellow line, and I saw it like electrically vividly clear in my mind. There's no, like when I say like occasionally I will have this kind of psychic knowing, this has happened to me a few times where I'm like just like it just is like something visual. It doesn't last long as click. It's electrically clear. And I was right there in front of the computer. The map program was already open. I had already made the map with the pin with the point of March 10th, the night before, 2 nights before. Yes, because this definitely happened on the day after. So this would have been March 12th when I had this psychic flash. And I was like, okay, the program's open. Let me just open it up. And I knew what the 2 endpoints were. I knew the westernmost endpoint. I might be mirrored a little bit, so I might have my east-west. So one point was at the west, and that was the westernmost point was March 10th, 2013, and that was on Highway 20, quite close to Interstate 15 between Beaver, Utah, and Cedar City, Utah. And then the other point I knew was May 13th, 2010, and that was an event I had when I was camping with my friend Natasha. Now, to tell the Natasha story here, I met Natasha at a conference, a UFO conference in 2009. I think that's right, 2009. And this would have been the same conference, the IUFOC. And at that point, it was in Laughlin, Nevada. And I think it lasted 8 days. It was incredible to go to an 8-day conference. It was incredible. Because you know what happens? You go to a conference and you meet someone and you kind of say, hey, we should talk. And then if it's a weekend conference, it's over and then you never talked. But wow, you have 8 days, man. You can sit down and really have the... So it was great. This is so funny. So early on in the conference, I have to tell, I usually don't tell this, but we got the time. It's a cute story. So there's a little Starbucks, and everyone gets up in the morning and they drink their coffee at this little Starbucks. It's in this super tacky, ugly casino thing. And so I got my coffee, and then I got like one of those little pastries, like a bear claw. And then there was no place to sit. It was kind of crowded. So there's this woman, and she was at a little table, and there was an empty seat, and she was on her laptop. And I kind of said, is it okay if I like join you at your table? There's no other seating. She said, of course. And so I sat down across from her, and I got on my laptop, and I was drinking my coffee and tapping away. And then I like started eating my bear claw and ate the whole thing. And she gave me this look like, when I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? And she said, you just ate my bear claw. And I was like, and I opened like, oops, I had mine in a paper bag still. And I took hers right off the middle of the table and ate it. So that's how we met. So I said, well, now you can have my bear claw, which I haven't touched yet. It's in this paper bag. And so, and that's how we met, which I thought was a really cute way of meeting. And then we became very good friends. And we ended up for 8 days, like hanging out together and going to talks together. Now, I'll also tell you this. This is another weird thing. So, and I usually can't tell this because so Natasha from Germany, she had gone to an astrologer, I think an astrologer, and this astrologer had this psychic vision that said, you have to get in an airplane, fly to Nevada, and go to this conference. And she did. So she did. She went to the conference. And then at the end of the conference, she had some powerful experiences too. She's had some really, really powerful experiences that sure seem to imply UFO contact. And then at the end of the conference, she was going to get on the shuttle bus, and she was going to go to the Las Vegas airport, which is kind of like this ugly drive through the desert. And the shuttle bus was, and I was like, hey, I'll take you. I'll take you. And so we went a little bit early, and we decided to get something to eat. And the food at the conference had been awful. So we were like, oh, let's find a spot. So there was a Whole Foods, and I was like, oh, we'll be able to find something there. So we pull into the Whole Foods parking lot somewhere in the suburbs of Las Vegas. And I am on one side of the car, and she's on the other side of the car. and she's on the passenger, and she gives me this look like, and I'm like, what is it? And I kind of walk to her side of the car, and she's holding this balloon, and it's this shiny heart-shaped balloon that says "I love you" on it, and she just hands it to me, and then I put it in the back of the car, and I'm like, wow, like, so, and then I didn't mention it. So we eat lunch, and we have, it was finally great to eat a good meal. And she was like, oh, I can get chocolate for the flight home. And she got some snacks for the flight home. And then I took her, she had to go to the international part of the airport, which is a different spot. And there's a different way. So like there was a point where we said goodbye, and it was real, like we both cried. It was really strong. It was really powerful. And then I drove from southern, like 15, 16 hours to get from Laughlin, Nevada to my house in Idaho with a balloon that said, "I love you" in the passenger seat. So I still have that balloon. It's in storage. It still has air in it. It's funny, I called her later on Skype. Like I called her in Germany. Like, I got on Skype. Skype is the pre-Zoom. And I was like, listen, I got to ask, where did that balloon come from? She goes, I don't know. Like, what? I was like, I think it was just like I got out of the car and it just like blew by and it was in my hand. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we ended up talking all the time and becoming really close over the next year. And so the next spring, 2010, yeah, that's right, May 13th, 2010. So I said, come to America. Let's drive around the West. Around the desert. We can go camping. I was a professional outdoor educator. I'm I'm uniquely well equipped to take people camping. And so we went hiking and camping all over the Four Corners area there. So so we've been hiking, camping. We've spent a lot of time in Canyonlands, and we did some ambitious stuff. We went for like 5 days, 4 days, 5 days, 4 nights deep in the backcountry at Canyonlands. It was really great, and slept under the stars every night. Never put up a shelter, and just wonderful. And then it was kind of like, felt like the trip was winding down a little bit, and then we were okay, we can head back to Idaho. So we were let's go to Mesa Verde, which is a place of it's a pueblo dwellings in the cliffs. It's technically in Colorado, right at the Four Corners area where Utah and Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado and Utah. There's 4 of them. All 4 states just come to that one point. They're the Four Corners area. So and then it's kind of in the high country. And then we camped up there, and then we were driving home or driving back towards to the north. And there's a little town of I'm drawing a blank on the town, but there's another. So anyway, we get to this little Cortez, Colorado. So we get to Cortez, Colorado, and the car is acting up. The car's like, it smells bad. There's something wrong with the brakes. I can feel the brakes aren't acting right. And so we get to Cortez and we eat lunch and we ask around, and the guy at the counter at this restaurant just says, I say, hey, my car's acting up. Is there a mechanic I can take it to? He says, oh, everyone uses this guy. He's a great guy. Everyone uses this guy. Go down the block, turn 2 blocks, you're there. So little town. It reminded me a lot of the town I was living in Driggs. And so we go to the spot and we pull the car in. He says, okay, give me a few minutes. I'll put it up on the rack here, and we'll come. And so we sat outside for a little bit. It was like this perfect spring day in that part of the country. So it was like super lazy, easy just to hang out there. And then they kind of come on back in. So this guy's literally got the rag, like the oily rag, and he's wiping his hands. And he goes, I can't let you leave town or you'll die. We're like, okay, what does that mean? You got to give me a little more than that. And he said, okay, here's the deal. Your car, the brakes are going to fail. They've essentially failed now, but they are on the verge of failing. And I would be liable if you got into an accident. I would be liable. So, and there was definitely something wrong with the brakes. And I'm like, okay. And said, well, I can fix it, but I got to order the parts and it's going to take 5 days. So we're like, oh, 5 days. So we're stuck. And then the guy, that was the mechanic. And then I'm working with the guy at the front desk who was great. He says, don't worry. I can, the people who do rent-a-cars, they're right down the street. Good friends with them. They'll set you up with a good deal. And then, and say, okay, so we got this super cheap rent-a-car. It was actually a lot nicer than my car. And so then we just drove around for another 5 days. So on the very first night, there's 2 towns. One is Cortez, and then there's this little itty bitty town called Dolores, Colorado. And it's a super cute tiny town. And we asked around and said, where's a good spot to sleep out? Like every town in the West has this, like, yes, where can we sleep out? Anyone in any town in the West will be able to say, oh, here's where you go. Like, just go out to the edge of town, you take this road, go off there, that's where people camp. So it was this great spot. So we drove a few miles out of town, and then we drove down this dirt road, and sure enough, there were these wonderful spots, and other people. There was one other tent, pretty, I don't know, it would have been 50 yards away. So it was a really beautiful spot. So we set up our tent, and then we actually set up our tent. Let's go back to town and have dinner. So we went back and we had pizza, and Natasha was really upset. She was really nervous, and she started crying at the dinner table. And she's like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "I don't know. I really don't know." So we got back in the car, went back to the tent, and went to sleep. And we woke up, and both of us were screaming. We both simultaneously woke up screaming, like both like, ah, like primal screaming. And I'm like, what's happening? What just happened? And I was like, and then I was like, Natasha, what's happening? What happened? And she said, I saw a face. And now I'm a professional outdoor. I've slept in grizzly bear country. I'm made of pretty strong stuff when it comes to sleeping in a tent. And I was like, boom, 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 boom. And my heart was just pounding, and it was just like the adrenaline. I was on full freak out mode. And I was like, we can leave here. We can go to town. We can get in the car. We can get out of here. We can just get out. We can go back to town. We can rent a hotel room. Let's get it. And I was just like, and she was just like totally silent. And at one point she just like, and I literally climbed on top of her like someone threw a hand grenade in the tent. And I was, the way I've described it is, if a grizzly bear had ripped through the tent, put its jaws around my neck, I would not have been as scared as I was in that moment. It was, and then Natasha and I describe it exactly the same way. I describe it as synthetic fear. It felt like fear that was irrational fear. And she described it as like, the deepest level of hell. So we're both going through this total freak out. And then she says under her breath, she says, do you believe in evil ghosts? And I was like, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I said no. And 100% of the reason I said no was because I just wanted to calm the vibe down. And I remember, this is so funny. And I was there, I was going, love and light, love and light, love and light, love and light, which is such a corny new age kind of aphorism, but good God. And then there was just like, we're both asleep. Like went from like, boom, 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 adrenaline to sleep. And my next memory, which I do not believe, but this is my memory, was I'm floating up in the tent, like elevator up. I'm floating up in the tent, and then I look to where one corner of the tent where Natasha's feet would be, and there's a floating like pizza pan sized circle with a little other circle in the center of it. But it would look like it was made out of translucent plexiglass or something. And it was kind of semi-translucent. It's really interesting. Someone said, could it have been someone shining a flashlight? Right? That would have made a circular pattern on on your tent. And I was like, oh, I know just what it looks like when someone shines a flashlight on a tent. Like I've spent decades of my life camping in tents. And so no, I would know. But it would look like a floating, translucent piece of plexiglass, pizza pan. I'm rising up. And as I'm rising up, I said to myself, that looks like the thing in my eye. And I'll get back to that. I'll get back to it. Doesn't make any sense now, but I'll get back to that. So I'm floating up and I just got, and as I'm floating, I say to myself, I have to remember this. 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 And I go up and then there's like I don't bump into the roof of the tent. I just like magically fade into this white realm. Like I don't think I was in a room. It felt like I was, floating in a white infinity. And I had been saying, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. And that changed to, am I on a table? Am I on a table? Am I on a table? And I have no memory of being on a table, but that is my memory. And this memory doesn't last very long. And I wrote this down. I have a diary entry. I have a photo in my blog of my diary entry I carried a sketchbook around. I had a diary entry of I drew the mandala shaped thing, which I called the mandala, the pizza pan shaped thing. And I was like, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. I have to remember this. Am I on a table? Am I on a table? Am I on a table? And I'll tell you, there was no emotion. It was really kind of void of emotion. I was really in a kind of neutral stance. And it felt like it happened. It felt like my eyes closed and I was floating. But again, I don't think this played out like this. And it also had an eerie sort of clarity and an eerie sort of silence to it, which gets reported sometimes in UFO events. So there's no UFO in this part of the story. And then I hear, so I'm in this white realm, nothing, like infinite nothing, and then Natasha, with her German accent, goes, Mike, you're floating. And whoosh, I'm right back in the tent. So this memory lasts all of I don't know, 20 seconds, maybe less than that. But wow, was it hyper clear. And then I slept wonderfully the rest of the night, which is unusual for me because you sleep outside, you wake up, you kind of nope. Slept all the way through. I wake up, the birds are chirping, the sun's shining, it's a beautiful morning. And I turned to Natasha and I was like, what happened last night? She said, I don't know what happened last night. I don't know. It said, you said you saw a face. What did you see? It's like, I don't know. I can't describe it. Come on. Try to describe what you saw. You said you saw a face. How would you describe it? And she said, you know what it looked like? It looked like the thing in your eye. And I was like, wait a minute, where did you see this? Where did you see it? And she said, I didn't know. She said it was right there. And she pointed right to the spot where I had seen the floating mandala. Now, in 2009, actually, I think it was the summer of 2009, I was working outdoors for the school that I was working for. And I got up in the middle of the night to go outside the tent and pee. And so, which is, you drink a lot of water all day and it's totally normal. This is the Wind River Range. This is the most spectacular mountain range in the Rockies. And we were at this spot with a lake and the stars and there's a full moon. And I look up at the full moon and there's this ring around the full moon, like this bright kind of wow, there might be some weather coming in, right? So that's the kind of thing you would get, these kind of ring around the moon if the weather's coming in. And I kind of closed one eye and it wasn't in one eye and it was in the other eye. And I was like, oh crap, this is something else entirely. It's like something up with my eye. And so I got out and then I was just driving. So we got back to town a week later and I got to town and then I was driving and there was halos around traffic lights and street lights and something's up with my eye. Something's up. So I went to an optometrist in Bozeman, Montana. And there's this little special gadget you can look really close in your eye and there's oh, you got a cataract in your right eye. And at the time I would have been 38. I would have been 48. And And that's a little on the young side to get a cataract. And I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. So, so anyway, so then later, this is so funny. So later I was in Los Angeles. I had been to a conference uh, in Joshua Tree run by Whitley Strieber. And I met a bunch of great people. And I wanted to visit some friends in LA. And my old girlfriend lived in LA. And so I ended up spending the night at my old girlfriend's house. And she had a young boy at the time and such like that. And we had long been broken up and we remained good friends. And then so I did so I did some errands that day, and I was just I hadn't spent much time in LA. I've been there a little bit, and so I was just driving around, going to bookstores and stuff like that. And then I said, "Hey, I'm on my way home." I gave her a call on my flip phone, and she said, "Can you hold off? I'm signing the divorce papers with my husband in the house right now." And I'm like, okay. She kind of hinted that, but I didn't know it was like that day. So I'm like, okay, you got the house. Don't you dare worry about me at all. So I'm not going to, so that's not for me. So so there was this lovely park in Pasadena, and I like laid on my back in this park. And it was just afternoon, and it had been, it was been a busy thing going to the conference and driving, and it was just like this perfectly magical kind of moment. And it was warm and pleasant. And you know how if you fall asleep in the sun and your eyes are just barely closed, you get the sunlight comes through your eyelashes a little bit, and you get these kind of twinkles, and you kind of just focus on those twinkles a little bit. And I could see the cataract in my eye. And I had kind of noticed it a little bit before then. But wow, it was all of a sudden, it was electrically clear. And I could just, if I just relaxed, it would just, and would be perfectly in focus. And that what the image was, a little bald man seated like a Buddha. And it had like spiraling halos around it, like some sort of one of those Hindu paintings of the Buddha or something like that. And I looked at this thing, and it looked, if it was a caricature, it looked like me. Oh, you're looking at this. So I sent you some images. Yeah, that's in there. You can scroll down, and there's one in pencil that is very exact. And I tried to capture the color of it in a second drawing. And so that color was really tough to capture the color in the kind of, because it was a little bit hazy and a little bit blurry. It was like looking at the glass in the bottom of like the thick glass in a Coke bottle. It had a lot of refracting twinkles and stuff in it. And but the pencil drawing is really clear. But I did the pencil drawing later. So I'm lying in the grass in Pasadena, and I look up at this thing, and I'm like, oh shit, I got to put this on my stupid blog, and I am going to make a total fool of myself because I am the only one in the world that can see this. It's not like I can take a picture and say, here, look at this picture I took. It's like, no, this is something that only I can see in my own eyeball. And I feel like I was that pencil drawing is pretty tight. So that pencil drawing looks a little bit like a caricature of me, like this bald guy. And I kind of had big eyes, and so I have these kind of big eyes, and it would also be a caricature of a gray alien head. And it would also be a caricature of sort of a death skull. Right? So it felt like it was covering these three bases. Me, aliens, and death. So like you don't have to, I'm not like I drew. When I got home, I laid down in my living room and I squinted at the sun, and I sketch on my clipboard, and I'd lay down and I'd squint at the sun. I could bring it right into focus, and I'd sketch. And then I drew it, I put it online, and I put it on my blog, and that was what Natasha said. She said, it looked like the thing in your eye. Now I was floating up, and I was floating past this circle pizza pan thing, and I looked at this thing that looked nothing like the head and the little caricature of myself, and I said, that looks like the thing in my eye. Now, to be fair, in the lead up to this, before seeing it, right after being diagnosed with a cataract, I could kind of squint and I would get like a little mandala donut shape that pretty clearly matched that mandala shape in the tent, that visionary experience. But it was more like multiples of it. There would be like little floating spots. And then, so now, shortly after that, it all went away. Like the halos around streetlights at night went away. I could lay down and squint at my eyes, nothing. Couldn't find it again. So that at some point, I could do it for about a month. I could see it super clearly, and then it just disappeared. So that was in the fall of 2009. In the spring of 2010, Natasha wakes up in the morning. I said, what'd it look like? What'd it look like? What'd that thing look like? And she said, it looked like the thing in your eye. I hadn't mentioned it. Like I had just woken up. And I was like, holy, like, good God, how weird can this get? So I got out of the tent and I walked around. I was looking for like the burn mark in the ground where the flying saucer had landed. There was nothing. It was like this beautiful, perfect spot. I will say this later. I did some research, and I talk about this in talks. To much less, like I sort of fast talk it and just hit the key points. I'm really going into it here. I called it a mandala, and the mandala shape, there's a line. So I just did some Google research, mandala, and then Carl Jung. I'm doing this quote off the top of my head, so I'm probably going to get it a little bit wrong. Carl Jung wrote in his papers, and I just found this in a Google search, so it wasn't like I was, searching through the archives of, the Jung Library in Switzerland or anything like that. So it was just, my patients would begin compulsively creating mandala designs simultaneous with a transformational life experience. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty close. Yeah. So, oh God, there's so much more I could say here. It just goes. So a person gets a hold of me and says, oh, the mandala, because once I put this online, they say, oh, the mandala is also an ancient symbol called the monad. It's also the symbol in astrology for the sun. So, and so that would be, it's called the monad. It's also called the Godhead. And I'm like, so in the ancient Pythagoreans, they are the ones that created this. And it's meant to signify the source of everything, which is, that sounds like the source of everything, God. Okay, those are synonyms in my mind. So I have this experience in the tent where I see an ancient symbol for God in the tent with us, simultaneous with this weird experience. Now, like, I can't, like, this just goes on and on and on. So I get up, I'm out of the tent, I'm walking around, there's nothing. There's no burn mark in the thing there. So I change my shirt and I'm like, I got a big weird scratch. I have a weird scratch. It starts at my left shoulder and goes down to my belly button. And there was a scratch, and it looked like it was made from a single rose thorn or a single cat claw. It was just this, and it looked like it was kind of broken and irregular, but it was a really straight line. And I had been out in the desert. We had been hiking and climbing over things, and I certainly could have gotten scratched, but I think I would have remembered. Like if I got a little scratch, I would dismiss it, but this was a big scratch. But when we looked at it, Natasha and I looked at it really closely, it was made up of a row of tiny, itty bitty, like 0.5 millimeter fluid-filled blisters, all in a row. Like, I don't know how you would even do that. How would you do that? So like the only way I can describe it is if you filled a pen with juice from poison ivy, And it was just the sharpest little fine point pen. And you just carefully touched it along the skin. It might produce a little rash where it would only produce little points that were a half a millimeter. Anyway, I don't know what it was. And then I'll also say that a few days later, I took a shower and it was gone. And once it was gone, both Natasha and I did the same thing. We went, we didn't take a picture of it. Why didn't we take a picture of it? And she does work in Germany as a UFO researcher. I was, running a UFO blog, and I was on podcasts, and I was hosting my own podcast at that time. I was like, ooh, it would have been the easiest thing in the world. We were taking pictures of every sunset and cactus. I was like, so go back to that morning. No burn mark in the field. I walked around. I was like, well, like what happened? So so we went to a coffee shop, and I said, who I'm going to call. I know someone. There's a woman named Miriam Delicado, and she's a friend of mine, and she wrote a book about her own contact experiences called Blue Star, and she's done a lot of work with the people in the Hopi Nation, and then the Hopi Nation it bumps right into the Navajo Nation there, and so I said I called her up and I basically said, hey, we're down here for 5 days. My car's in the shop. What do we do? And she says, here's what you do. You go to Canyon de Chelly and you go have a sweat lodge with this guy at this campground. He's a native. He's an elder. You go. He performs sweat lodge ceremonies, and I'm like, great. So we got on the phone, found him right away. We got on our laptops and looked him up, found him right away, and then I made a phone call and said, hey, can we have a sweat lodge ceremony? He said, okay, we'll do it. Would have been the next day, tomorrow, and it was a few hours drive, and then we booked a. You're not allowed to go in the bottom of that canyon without a Navajo guide. It's on Navajo land. So and it was fine. So we hired this woman. Her name was, I want to say Virginia or Victoria. I think it was Victoria. So we hired a Navajo young woman, and she was great. So we walked around all afternoon, and she took us, we walked down the Slick Rock, and it's this incredible, it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And it has a totally different feel than the national parks, and there's all kinds of old ruins and stuff there. And she was like, in our tradition, we don't go into the old ruins. They're considered, those are sacred places. They're not our home. Kind of like you don't want to disrupt the spirits that still may reside there. So I'm like, and then Natasha kind of said, like our whole thing started, when we went into the ruins in Mesa Verde. So were we like, was this some native land backlash? And I was like, I don't, like that's maybe. So the next day we have the sweat lodge ceremony, and the sweat lodge is this real simple, and it's in the campground, and it's this really pretty spot up on the rim. So you can be up on the rim and you can walk to the edge of the rim and look down into the canyon, just a short walk away. And it's this magical, fantastic spot. And, but it looks like a campground. There's like people parked with their, pickup trucks and small RVs and stuff like that. And we had our tent set up there. And then the Hogan, the little sweat lodge, it wasn't a Hogan technically, but the little sweat lodge was just made with metal rods bent in hoop shaped, and it was all covered in blankets. And he had a fire going on the outside, and he would carry these big rocks in and put them in the middle of the sweat lodge, and then put hot water on them. And wow, did it get hot. So it was 4 separate sessions. In each session, in between each session, we would go out, and it was hot, and we would just lay, we were like exhausted and sweaty. And so there was other people at the campground. So it was probably 5 or 6 of us in there. And the fellow that was running it did a beautiful job. And he said, the theme of this experience is surrender. You are going to surrender to the heat. You are going to surrender to the 4 points on the compass, our ancestors and our future generations, things to come, the things to come, thing in the past. And so you're going to surrender to all of it. So that was a long story. And it begins with a guy saying, you can't leave town or you'll die. And it ends with a symbolic shamanic ritual of death and rebirth. So there's one point on the thing is what happened on March 10th. The other one in Dolores, Colorado is on May 13th. That line is 231 miles long, right? And there was a spot in the middle. And I've had a lot of weird stuff happen in the desert. So I'm like, what could that be? And I was like, oh, you know what? That's the Birch Trail Road. So the year after, in 2011, March 2nd, 2011, Natasha came back to, we went to the UFO Congress together. And then we hiked around in the desert and stuff like that and took our time driving back. So we had just finished 5 or 8 days. I think that year was 5 days. And so we had just finished 5 days of being at the conference. And then we were going to drive back to my home in Idaho, and she was going to fly home from Idaho. And so we took a beautiful drive, took the scenic drive and stuff like that. So we get to this spot and I'm like, okay, well, I've been here before. Let's try, I think there's a road down here. Let's see. Oh, and we found the greatest spot to camp. And it was still daylight, and we watched the sunset, and we cooked on a little camp stove, and it was great. It was just great. And I was tired because I had been driving all day, and Natasha was jet lagged. So the sun goes down and it's nighttime and I'm asleep. And she wakes me and she says, Mike, I'm like, I can't sleep. What do I do? And I'm like, take a walk. She's like, really? Is it safe here? And I'm like, oh, this is like Southern Utah. This is like the safest place in America. It's safe here. Don't worry at all. She's like, okay. So she walks away and I'm laying there drifting in and out of sleep. And she walks off and then I'm lying. Okay, so how to tell this right? So I'm lying there. She's off walking on her own. I'm drifting in and out of sleep. Right next to my head is a little juniper bush. And in that juniper bush is a great horned owl. And it is hooting. And it is as loud as any owl I have ever heard. I am as close to that owl as I've ever been to an owl hooting. And it is booming loud. And it is the unmistakable call of a great horned owl. And I am like, I sat up and I looked at this bush and I'm like, why can't I see it? Why can't I see it? And now telling this story now, it is like, I can't separate this from the coyotes that I saw on March 10th, 2013. So I am listening to this owl and I kind of go back to sleep. And then all of a sudden Natasha wakes me up and is like, Mike, we got to leave. I'm like, what? And she said, we got to leave. We got to get out of here right now. We got to get out of here. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what's going on? She said, well, and she told me what happened. And then so we had a lot of time. So we were driving. We had lots of time to talk about this. So she said, she said, I was walking. There's a little bit of a sand section, and then you get on this asphalt. And she said, I was walking on the asphalt, and I didn't need a flashlight. The stars were so bright, they illuminated everything. Again, this was a new moon. And so there was no moon in the sky. And so the stars were illuminating everything. She said, it was so magical. I've never experienced anything like this, walking only by starlight. And this is prime desert starlight country. Like there's no light pollution. It is. And she says, I felt like I was sparkling. And she looks off and there's like a light in the off the side of the road. And her first thought is someone's walking along with a flashlight. And she looks at this and she says, it's a orb. It's a floating white orb. So this white orb floats along. And she said it gets kind of big, like the size of a beach ball, and it shrinks back down and it's floating along. And it's like, and then it's kind of coming towards me, and then poof, it like explodes. It like silently goes poof and explodes in a big flash. And then there's nothing. And now she's scared. And so she runs back and she wakes me up and says, Mike, we got to get out of here. So like, we packed up in 5 minutes and we were driving. And both of us were like, boom, 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 hearts going, like, wow, that was, what's a what? Now, that was the middle point. So you take 2 points and pull them tight. So 1 point here, 1 point here. They're going to make a straight line. That's just how it works. They're going to create a straight line. That straight line was 230 miles along. So one corner is right near Beaver, Utah. The other corner is right near Dolores, Colorado. And so that spot in the middle, I had the map thing, so I just sat down with the maps. Okay, no, wait. So now we're like, turn the clock back up to 2013. I'm at my desk making this map. I had all the map stuff. I had the psychic vision of the map in my mind. I tinker and I make this maps and I get the GPS coordinate and I find exactly the spot where we were sleeping, which I had already pinpointed on a map near Dolores, Colorado. I had exactly, that's where the terror in the tent was. The half-hour long story I had to tell. And then the other last point was the confirmation event, or what I call the confirmation event, the round structure on the hill and the coyote and the bright light behind the bush, and razor tight little line. And then I connect those two with a line, and then I already had those two connected, and I had that part of the map turned off, and I said, okay, where was I? My sleeping pad would have been right here in the sand. I found it exactly. I would have been sleeping right here. There's the juniper bush right next to my head where the owl was. And then Natasha pointed out, like, we had looked at all these maps, and she pointed out, we had maps made where she had pointed out where she had been walking, because she came to my house and we made maps and says, this is where I walked from here. I got all the way to this spot. I would have been near this rock. And that's when I ran back. And so she wasn't very far. She was like less than 100 yards away. Now, I had a little button on my computer. I switched a little button and it just like turned on the map layer that had the little thin line. And it bypassed exactly through where I was lying in the sand on my sleeping pad. This is like in the olden days, like before maps, what is that, 15 years ago, the olden days, I would have had to take a great big giant paper map and put it on the kitchen floor and take a big giant, 3-foot long yardstick, and then taken a really, really sharp pencil, and I could have connected those 2 points. But when you zoomed in, that line may have been like a half-mile thick, right? The pencil line, no matter how sharp my pencil was, I could get that line 1 pixel thick, zoom in, and it bypassed where I was sitting. And in that moment, it was like, oh, my old life has ended, and my new life has begun. I'm like, there is no doubt. Like I had those other two experiences. I denied them. And it wasn't until the line on the map lined up perfectly. So I realized I had been walking around for years with a voice in my head that said, this can't happen. This can't be happening. This can't happen. This cannot be happening. Can't happen to you. It can't be happening. And then when I saw that line on the map, it was like just someone pushed a little eject button, took the tape out and threw the tape away. And I had a clarity because I didn't have that goddamn voice in my head saying, this can't be real. I was like, okay, it's real. It's plainly real. Like this is not a coincidence. Like this is not there's no government conspiracy here, because they couldn't have planned this. Now, a few things. I love maps. I love making maps. Right? I love sleeping on the ground. I love sleeping outside. I love things like coyotes and owls. I love this story has a shamanic ritual in it. I love that. So this whole set of events is so uniquely tailored to me, and I'm the nerdy guy who's good at making maps. So this was tailored uniquely to me that I could do. I actually had the maps made. I had the GPS spots marked out for other experiences already. Now, two of the points on the map. So it's 3 polka dots on the line. 1, 2, 3. 2 of them, I was with Natasha. The other one, March 10th, 2013, I was alone. March 10th is Natasha's birthday. We were in Dolores, Colorado. You write that out, Dolores CO. Natasha studied with Dolores Cannon. So it's like it just goes on and on and on and on and on. If I like sat here, I could fill another week with all the weird synchronicities connected with this stuff. Now, fast forward to 2018, actually 2017. I did a hypnosis session with Mary Rodwell. Are you familiar with her at all? Anyway, she lives in Australia. She's English. She does hypnosis work. So I did a session with her. She was traveling. She was visiting someplace, and she was visiting an acquaintance in New Hampshire. I was living in upstate New York, and just was right across the border. So I went and did a hypnosis session, and the story emerged. Wow, story blew my mind. I didn't know what to make of it. So a year later, I did another hypnosis session with Yvonne Smith. So in 2018, I got called to speak at a private high school in California, and they have a camping program as part of their high school. And so they invited me to talk about ultralight backpacking. I wrote a book about ultralight backpacking. It's got cartoons in it. So this guy that runs the program, this really nice guy, says, would you come out and speak at my school? And I can, he's like, I'll fly you out from upstate New York. I'm like, sure, and so and I got a stipend and a rent-a-car, and it was great. And so, while I was out there, I said, I'm going to tack on some few extra days, and so I tacked on a few extra days, and I called Yvonne, and this would have been like a month or two before the actual event. So earlier in the summer, because this would have been August of 2018. So it would probably have been June of 2018. I called her. I said, Yvonne, I'm going to be in California. I would love to do a session. And we had met at conferences. She knew who I was. And she said, Mike, what a nice surprise. I started reading your book, The Messengers, this morning. So like, this is so normal to me. This is so normal to me. So I go to California. I'm staying with Greg Bishop, a UFO researcher who lives in Hollywood, and I drive to Pasadena, and this is a weird detail. Here's a weird detail. I was there a little bit early. I didn't know how long the traffic was going to be. I'm there a half hour early or something. So there's her office. Right next to her office is this park. I laid in a park in Pasadena, California, under the sun, which I had not done. I've only done that twice in my life, and one time was when I saw the light in the thing in my eye. So I go in to do the session with her. So I'm lying on the couch. Actually, we're sitting up. We talk for a good long bit beforehand. And I said, I want to look into the night of March 10th, 2013. And the reason I feel totally comfortable looking into this is because I have no fear associated with that night. It was a beautiful night. It was lovely. There was a coyote. There was the stars were beautiful. I just loved that. Everything about, there's no fear associated with that. The thing with the freaking terror in the tent, no way. And I want to look into that one. So she says, of course. Like, okay, so she made some notes and stuff like that. And so also, hey, just like she had 2018, my book, The Messengers, had been out for 3 years. So I was like, listen, I'm like, can you ask while I'm under, what's up with the owls? She says, of course. Just because I'll be in this vulnerable state, let's ask what's up with the owls. And she said, of course. Now, so I laid on, that's funny, I laid on the couch. I'm too tall for her couch. So I had to we moved the coffee table, and I had my legs kind of crooked off on the coffee table. And so she does a little induction. Simple thing. You go down some stairs, and she's got this really quiet voice. And I had been hypnotized once before for something else. I tried it a bunch, nothing happened. And then I did it one time for alleviation of depression. So I feel like I had a wonderful success with a past life hypnotherapies. Nothing to do with the, well, it did have a little bit to do with the UFO stuff, but essentially nothing to do with it. So I was like, okay, like, and I went right under. And she's like, where are you? And so we were exploring that night. And I was like, well, I'm, right near my car. My little Subaru is parked right there. And there's this big juniper bush by my feet. And I'm warm. And it's a nice night. And the stars are pretty. And she's okay, what happens next? And I'm like, oh, it's like, I got my big, like it's, and like for a little bit there, nothing was happening. And then I go, it's them. It's them. It's them. I know it's them. And I was describing the bright light behind the bush. It's like this bright light there. It's them. It's them. I know it's them. And then I go, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out, and I'm looking down. I'm looking down at this big thing. It's this big black shape. It's the thing. It's the big round structure. I'm above it. I'm floating above it. I'm looking down at it. It's this big black thing on the hilltop, and it's there's nothing to see. It's just like this big black thing, and there's lights around the edges of it. I'm floating above it, and I think I'm still in the sleeping bag. And she goes, very gentle voice. She goes, Mike, are you out of body? I'm like, I don't know. I'm looking down at this thing, but I think I'm still in the sleeping bag. What happens next? I don't believe. I don't believe it. But it's a great story. It's true that the words came out of my mouth under hypnosis. Those words got recorded by the little voice recorder, and I transcribed it. That's all true. I don't trust this memory, and you'll know why in a second. So all of a sudden I'm walking along, I'm floating down, I'm looking down at this thing. Yvonne says, are you out of body? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. I'm looking down at this thing, but I think I'm still in the sleeping bag. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, I'm walking down this hall. And I'm in this curved hallway. And it's like, if there was a big flying saucer and there was a hallway that circumnavigated the inside of that flying saucer and went round and round and round, it felt like I was in that hallway. And I instantly knew, my first thought was, I'm not tall. Like, I'm not tall. I know just what it means to be tall. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm not tall. I'm short. And I say this out loud. I'm like, I'm not tall. And she goes, look around you. What do you see? And I look to my right, and there's this gray alien walking right next to me, and he's about the same height as me. And I look to my left, and there's this gray alien walking right next to me, and he's about the same height as me. And she says, Mike, look down at yourself. And I look down at myself, and I've got these long, skinny fingers, and I've got this tight little shiny spacesuit on, and I'm skinny as can be. And I'm like, and I say, I think I'm a gray alien. She doesn't flinch at all. And I'm like, this feels so normal. This feels so normal. And we talked about it after a little bit, and it felt like I had been in my astral form, floating above this thing. I went whoosh, and went right into like a rubber alien suit that was like waiting for me on a hook, and I just walked right down the hall. So I can't, so I'm walking, and she says, man, Mike, what happens next? I also asked her after the session, does this happen? Do you get this? Like, people say this a lot, that they're gray aliens on board the ship, and in her very gentle way, she went, all the time. It happens all the time. I'm like, okay, so I didn't know. I mean, I kind of knew that I've read a lot. So, and I will also say, like, I have read enough that my file cabinets here, I could confabulate and make up the perfect story. So I have lots of reasons to doubt the validity of what happened, but it's a great story. So the next thing, she goes, what happens next? And I'm in this, all of a sudden I'm in this little, like this ugly conference room. It's like got beige carpeting and ugly wallpaper and harsh fluorescent lights up above. And there's plastic folding table right in front of me. And then the other side of the folding table are these beings and their faces are kind of fuzzed out, but wow, it was like between 8 and 12 like gray aliens. And it felt like I was on trial. It felt like I was standing in like a grand jury hearing or something like that. So I'm standing there facing the jurists. And now you're getting the big story here. I felt like the two beings were behind me that I walked in the hall with. I felt like they were behind me, but I couldn't turn around. I felt like I never turned around, but I felt like they were right behind me. I told this to someone who does near-death experience research, and she went, "Oh, the two beings behind you, very common." I'm like, "What? What is it really?" It's like, "Oh yeah, it's very common in that people will report two beings behind them in like a near-death experience where they die in the operating table. They go to the heaven and they have this meeting with two beings behind them." And I'm looking forward, and there's these 8 gray aliens, kind of fuzzed out, but that's sure what the impression I got, facing me. And I told this story to a shaman one time, and he said, Mike, you lost me. You lost me with the gray aliens. I'm like, well, like, what's wrong? It's like, I don't buy it. Like, well, what would make more sense to you? He said, well, if you had said you were facing 8 crows, I would have no problem. I was like, okay, what would you call those crows? Your spirit guides. Like, okay, I can follow that logic. Like I can't say that's what, but it was just so funny that these two different disciplines were both like, it's like, I could, anyway, so I'm adding all this extra stuff in here, but I'm standing in front of these things, these beings, and I go, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And they go, you chose this. I chose this? What does that mean? I chose this. Now is the time. Wait a minute. What? I don't know what you mean. I chose this? What? Why am I here? You volunteered for this. Wait, what? What's going on? Now is the time. And we got stuck in this thing, and it was just like, you chose this. Now is the time. And then all of a sudden, like, I just snapped. And I was so furious. So I was just like, they don't understand. They don't understand fear. They don't understand loneliness. They don't understand what it's like to be sad. They don't understand what it's like to be here. And I'm like freaking screaming. This is so brutal to try to listen to. And I like had to put the headphones on and transcribe so I'm like just gasping and crying and sobbing and wailing out. They don't understand what it means to be here. They don't understand. And Yvonne's, Mike, what's happening? It's like, they don't understand. They see this like, this is some business deal, and they don't understand. And this is so fucked up. I am so pissed off, and they don't understand. It's like, Mike, and this goes on for a while. It's harsh to try to listen to it. And then, I'm like, I'm so, and she goes, and Mike, and like, what do they want? And I scream, they want me to play some role. And then at that moment, you can audibly hear me on the audio. You can hear me go, and I went from as tense, just veins in my forehead, just full body tension, just like as tense as I have ever been in my life, to like calm in a way that no Zen practitioner could achieve. My breathing stopped. It felt like my heart stopped. I was just floating in calm on that couch. 45 seconds go by. Total silence. Yvonne says, and Mike, what happens next? And I go, I think I'm back in the sleeping bag. We talk and we tried to review what may have happened. And she said, what did they want? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, you can tell us, Mike. You can tell me, Mike. What did they want? And I said, I don't think I can. It was like I was in a spy movie, and I was holding the envelope, but I wasn't allowed to open that envelope. And I said that under hypnosis. And we go when she tries to ask me some questions, we're not getting anywhere. And she goes, "And Mike, what is your connection to owls?" And I don't skip a beat. I very clearly say, the owls aren't important. Now, at this point, I had written 2 books on owls and UFOs. I was answering owl emails every day. I was on podcasts all the time. I was doing owl research. I was talking to people on the phone. It was like owls, owls, owls all day long. I get up in the morning all day long till the sun goes down. Owls, owls, owls. They were the most important thing in my life. And the words that came out of my mouth said, the owls aren't important. And then I kind of spoke in this really clear, calm way, which was hypnosis. You kind of whisper under hypnosis. And there's these long pauses. So I spoke very plainly. And I was like, the owls aren't important. I am an artist, and I understand how people need a symbol. The owls aren't important, yet they are the correct symbol. The owl is a symbol on a door, but the owl is unimportant. It is the door that is important, and the owl is the correct symbol. We are on this side of the door in a tight, claustrophobic little hallway, and on the other side of the door is an infinite vastness. And then I was out. I came out of it. I asked her, was I channeling? She had to give me an answer I really love. This is like, I really respect the answer she gave. She said, how would I know? Good. Okay. It's because I don't know either. Because it's my voice, obviously, but it has a different, when you listen to it on the recording, it sounds different. So she brings me out. We talk about it a little more. You know, she was pressing, like, what did they want? I couldn't answer what they wanted. And now, after that, I was clinging to the owls. After that, I could really step back and not be so clingy to the owls. I will also say the exact same story emerged under hypnosis with Mary Rodwell a year before. I was just as emotional. I was just as distraught, but we were covering a bunch of other things. We were jumping around all kinds of life events and talking about other things. And so it was like, it was part of a collection of things that we were exploring under that session. Again, I didn't quite believe it then either. Now, the second time, it was just as powerful. It was like watching a rerun, right? So you watch a rerun, you go watch TV and it's like, oh, I saw this show. And then you watch the whole half-hour episode again, and it's frame by frame. It's exactly the same thing. But for me, it was exactly the same thing as well as the same emotions. So it felt just as raw. Now, we only covered that one thing. So we were able to cover it much more cleanly in the second session. And I've talked to both of them since then, and they both understand that. And they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Now, the night of March 10th, 2013, I slept under the stars. I looked up at that round structure on the hill. 8 years later, I did hypnosis session after writing 2 books. But the hypnosis session was about that night and that round structure on the hill. I got home on March 11th. I did a blog post. On March 12th, I had the vision of the map, did all the map making stuff, and then had my awakening experience. Or my confirmation experience. I felt like my old life ended, my new life began. The next day, it took me years to figure this out. I went back and looked at my notes and emailed things, and the next day, I started writing the book, The Messengers. The last thing I screamed was, they want me to play some role. And if that happened on board that round structure, that thing that looked like a landed flying saucer on that hill, if that happened, less than 48 hours later, I began the book that defined my life. Like, am I at the whim of like am I a puppet performing, playing a role for these entities? You know what I'm asking, right?
Wow, I really don't know what to say. I don't know about you, but that story left me at a loss and with so much to process. Thank you so much for sharing that unabridged version of your confirmation event, Mike. You have been such an incredible guest. Make sure to check out Mike's podcast, Hidden Experience, here on Spectre Vision Radio, and look for links to Mike's work in the show notes. I now affirm the sphere dissolved and the transmission complete. So it is. If you've had a psychic, paranormal, or unexplained experience, you can call or text our listener line, The Void, at 323-332-1190. Follow us on Instagram at EtherPod, and join me at patreon.com/theetherpod. That's TheAetherPod for bonus episodes, guest interviews, ASMR, sound, tarot, and much more. This podcast has been brought to you by Spectre Vision Radio. Theme music by Late Life. Created, edited, and produced by Nicole Johnstone.